The cage reeked of old blood and unwashed hay, and the orc chained inside it had not eaten in 4 days. Clayton Holloway smelled the fort before he saw it: wood smoke, horse sweat, and beneath it something sourer, something like fear left too long in the sun. He reined his lead team to a halt at the gates of Fort Kestrel, with 11 wagons strung out behind him on the Pilgrim Road, 43 settlers and pilgrims trusting him to get them to Thistlewood Shrine Town before the autumn rains turned the passes to mud. He was not a man who looked for trouble. He looked for water, for grain, for a place to make camp before dark. But trouble had a way of standing right in the middle of the road when he least wanted it, and this time it was standing in an iron cage set up on a cart bed in the middle of the fort's yard, in plain view of every soldier, trader, and pilgrim passing through. She was on her knees in the straw, wrists bound behind her with a chain looped through an iron collar, and even folded down small the way captivity forces a body to fold. There was nothing small about her. Her shoulders were wide as a blacksmith's, her arms corded with muscle beneath skin the deep green-gray of river stone, and her tusks chipped at one tip, but proud, ivory pale, jutted from a jaw set so hard with defiance that Clayton understood at once she had not broken, whatever they had done to her. She wore what was left of a warrior's leathers, a sleeveless jerkin of dark hide laced tight across her chest and ribs, one lace snapped and gaping, leather bracers scored with old fight scars, a wrapped skirt guard over leggings gone stiff with dried mud and worse. Even starved, even chained, she was the most striking thing he had ever seen, and it was the hollows beneath her cheekbones and the visible line of her ribs beneath the torn leather that made his chest go tight with something close to anger. "Feed her," a soldier was saying, not to Clayton but to another soldier in the tone men use when they are enjoying a cruelty and calling it duty. "Captain says scraps only. Save the good stores. She's leverage, not a guest." "She's starving," Clayton said before he had decided to say anything at all. The soldier, young, freckled, self-important with his new sergeant's stripe, turned to look at him like he'd found a talking dog. "She's an Ashfang raider, friend. Her lot burned the Corrigan farmstead not 2 months back. You want to feed her, you go right ahead and explain that to Captain Dunmore." As if summoned by his own name, Captain Dunmore came striding across the yard, a broad man in a four-tissue coat with the kind of face that had learned cruelty could look like discipline if you said it stern enough. "Wagon-master," he said, taking in Clayton's dust-caked coat and the string of wagons beyond the gate. "You'll want to keep your people back from the cage. She's not tame." "She's starving," Clayton said again, because it was the only thing that mattered to him just then. "She's a hostage," Dunmore said, as if that settled it. "We're holding her for the parley at 3 Roads Shrine, trading her clan's captured war captain back for grazing rights and a piece on the tolls. Until then she eats what a hostage eats, which is little, and she'll be grateful for that much." Urzoth Strongtusk lifted her head at that, and her eyes, a startling amber, lit like lantern glass, found Clayton's across the yard. She did not plead. She did not look away, either. She looked at him the way a caged wolf looks at a man who has paused too long by the bars, weighing whether he is fool enough to be worth the effort of hoping. Clayton walked to the cage before he had finished thinking it through. "Wagon-master," Dunmore warned, "I'd step back from that." "I'm not going to touch her," Clayton said, kneeling instead in the straw and dust outside the bars, close enough that he could see the cracked skin at her knuckles, the raw line the collar had worn into her throat. He reached into his coat and drew out the ration he carried for the road: hard traveler's bread wrapped in a cloth, and a strip of dried venison he'd been saving for the evening's watch. It was not much. It was what he had. He held it out through the bars. For a moment she did not move, and he understood the stillness for what it was: suspicion, the particular wariness of someone who has learned that kindness from an enemy usually comes with a hook in it. Her amber eyes searched his face, flicking to the soldiers watching, to Dunmore's reddening scowl, back to the bread in his outstretched hand. "It isn't poison," Clayton said quietly. "I'd have no reason. I've got more where I'm going. You don't." "Holloway," Dunmore snapped, using the name off Clayton's manifest like a rebuke. That Ration's fort property the second you're inside these walls. Feeding hostages isn't your business. Then take it out of my fee for the wagon train's water, Clayton said, not looking away from her. I'll pay for my own bread twice over if I have to, but I'm not going to sit here and eat while she starves in front of me. That's not a kind of man I want to be. There was a silence in the yard that had weight to it, the kind that makes onlookers shift their feet. A pilgrim woman by the gate crossed herself. A teamster spat in the dust like the whole business disgusted him. And still Clayton knelt there, arm outstretched, bread and meat balanced on his open palm, waiting. Urzoth's Strongtusk moved at last. She leaned forward against the chain's limit, and with a control that told him exactly how much strength she was choosing not to use, she took the offered food from his hand with lips and teeth rather than bound fingers, careful not to so much as graze his skin with a tusk. She ate slowly, deliberately, watching him the entire time, as if daring him to flinch, to pull back, to prove himself like every other human who had looked at her only to look away in disgust. He did not flinch. When she had finished, she swallowed, and her voice came out low and rough from days of disuse and thirst, but there was nothing broken in it. Why? Because you're hungry, Clayton said, and I had food. That is not a reason humans understand, she said. Humans understand debts, uses. What do you want for it? Nothing, he said. I don't do it to be owed. Something moved behind her eyes, then not softness, not yet, but a recalculation, the look of someone rebuilding a wall they'd thought was finished and finding a door in it they hadn't noticed before. Then I will decide what it is worth, she said. I do not forget debts, human, small ones least of all. What is your name? Clayton Holloway. Urzoth, she said. Urzoth Strongtusk, war captain of the Ashfang clan. I will remember it, Clayton Holloway, however long it takes. Dunmore hauled Clayton up by the shoulder before he could answer, more rough than necessary, and told him in flat words to move his wagons through the gate and make his camp outside the walls if he meant to keep sentimental company with prisoners. Clayton went, because he had 43 people depending on him reaching Thistlewood before the rains, and because there was nothing more he could do for her that night beyond what he had already done. But he looked back once, at the cage in the yard, at the amber eyes still tracking him through the bars, and felt the strange, unfamiliar sensation of having been truly seen by someone he expected never to see again. He was wrong about that, though it would be the better part of a year before he learned it. The wagon train reached Thistlewood 4 days later without incident, and Clayton delivered his charges to the Shrine Town's boarding houses and collected his fee and told himself, as he told himself every trip, that his job was done until the next contract came in. He did not think of the orc in the cage every hour. He thought of her perhaps only every few hours, which for a man with a schedule as punishing as his was as good as constant. Word came through the Pilgrim Road inns before he made it back to Fort Kestrel on his return leg. The parley at the Shrine of 3 Roads had gone forward, hostages traded both directions, a fragile truce stitched together over grazing rights and toll fees between the human garrisons and the Ashfang clan. Urzoth Strongtusk, war captain, released and returned to her people. Clayton found himself relieved in a way that surprised him. The way a man is relieved to learn a stranger he helped once did not die of it. He did not expect to think of her again beyond that relief. The road did not allow much room for lingering on any one thing, not with bandits working the ravines above the shrine crossings, and the rains coming early that year, and turning half his usual fords to mud traps. He drove 3 more trains that season, pilgrims bound for the healing springs at Saltmere, a family of homesteaders hauling their whole lives in 2 wagons, a merchant convoy that paid well and complained constantly. He mended axles by lantern light and argued toll rates with garrison quartermasters, and slept more nights under a wagon bed than in any proper roof. And if some part of him kept an eye on the tree line, whenever the road ran along the northern hills where the Ashfang clan held their grazing grounds, he told himself it was only good wagon-master sense. It was the following spring, on the stretch of the Pilgrim Road between the shrine of the First Star and the wayhouse called the Broken Wheel, that the debt came due. Clayton's train that season was smaller 6 wagons, mostly pilgrims headed to the healing shrine at Saltmere for a woman's ailing lungs, plus a family of 3 bound for a homestead claim near the border grazing lands. A claim Clayton privately thought was foolish given how close it sat to Ashfang territory. But a man's foolishness was not Clayton's business to correct, only to deliver safely. They were 2 days out from the Broken Wheel, moving through a narrow defile where the road cut between 2 rocky shoulders thick with scrub pine when the ambush came. It was fast and it was ugly. Men on foot dropped from the rocks above with ropes and cudgels, more men blocking the road ahead with a felled tree, and Clayton had time only to shout for the wagons to circle before the first arrow took his lead ox in the shoulder, and the animal screamed, and the whole column jackknifed into chaos. These were not orc raiders. He knew that immediately from the human faces beneath the dirty scarves, from the accent of the man who shouted for them to throw down their coin, and their women would live highway bandits, the kind that had been growing bolder along the Pilgrim Road for a year now, emboldened by the thin garrisons and the general chaos of a truce nobody quite trusted. Clayton got the homesteader's wife and her boy down behind an overturned wagon bed, took an arrow graze along his forearm reaching for his own knife, and was bracing for the worst when the hillside above the defile erupted with a sound he would remember for the rest of his life, a war horn, deep and rolling, and then orcs, not raiders, a patrol, 6 of them, dropping down the scree slope with axes and short spears, moving with the terrible efficient speed of soldiers who had trained together for years. At the front of them, swinging a broad-bladed axe that caught the gray afternoon light like a struck bell, was Urzoth Strongtusk. She was leaner than the cage had left her, filled back out with muscle and health, and she moved through the bandits like a woman clearing brush, not cruel, not wasteful, but utterly without hesitation. Clayton watched her put her shoulder into one man and send him sprawling into the ravine wall, watched her catch a swung cudgel on her bracer and answer with the flat of her axe hard enough to drop the wielder where he stood, watched her turn, scanning the chaos, and find Clayton's face across the wreck of the wagon train. Something in her expression changed recognition, sharp and sudden, and beneath it something fiercer that he did not have a name for yet. "Down," she bellowed at him, and he dropped without thinking, and the arrow meant for his back took the bandit crouched behind him instead, loosed by one of her patrol from the ridge above. When he looked up she was standing over him, axe bloodied, breathing hard, close enough that he could see the old collar scar still pale against her throat. "You," she said. "Me," he agreed, a little stupidly, still on his knees in the road dust. The skirmish did not last much longer after that. Whatever remained of the bandit band scattered into the scrub once they understood orcs had joined the fight against them, and Clayton's patrol, his 6 wagons, his frightened pilgrims, the homesteader family clutching each other behind the wagon bed, came through with nothing worse than the dead ox, a graze on Clayton's arm, and a wagon wheel that would need a full day's mending. Urzoth's patrol had 1 warrior with a cracked rib from a lucky cudgel blow, nothing more. She helped him up by the wrist, her grip warm and startlingly gentle for a hand that had just split a man's shoulder to the bone, and did not let go right away. "Clayton Holloway," she said, as if confirming it to herself. "The road brings debts back around faster than I expected." "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know exactly what I had to do," she said. "This was not duty. This was payment." She looked at the wreck of his train, at the frightened faces peering out from behind wagon wheels, and something almost like amusement moved across her mouth. "You feed poorly for a wagon-master, still giving away your last bread." "Only to people who need it worse than me," he said, and found himself smiling despite the ache in his arm and the smell of blood in the road dust. "I owed you a life," she said, more seriously now. "Bread for a starving prisoner is a small thing to some. It was not small to me. I told my clan I carried the debt, Tonight I have paid the first part of it. The first part. A life is worth more than one rescue, she said, as though this were simple arithmetic, and in her world perhaps it was. I will decide when the debt is settled. Until then, wagon-master, you will find my patrol closer to your road than you might like. He did not mind that at all, though he did not say so, not yet. They camped that night at her patrol's insistence, sharing a fire with the survivors of his train, while her warriors kept watch on the ridges in case the bandits regrouped. The pilgrims were terrified of the orcs at first. One older man muttered about devils and false rescues. Sure, this was some trick before the real slaughter. But Urzoth ignored the mutters with the ease of someone who had heard worse her whole life. And when she caught the homesteader's boy staring at her tusks with wide, frightened eyes, she surprised everyone by bearing them in a grin instead of a snarl, and asking him, in passable trade tongue, if he had ever seen a war axe up close. By the time the fire burned low, the boy was asking to hold it, and his mother had stopped clutching him quite so tightly, and Clayton found himself watching Urzoth across the flames with an attention he was having a harder and harder time explaining away as simple gratitude. "You are staring, wagon-master," she said without looking at him, which meant she had noticed anyway. "Sorry," he said, "not sorry at all." "Do not apologize for looking at something you find worth looking at," she said. And this time she did look at him, amber eyes catching the firelight, and the air between them went taut as a drawn bowstring for one long moment before she turned back to banking the fire, as if she had not just said something that had turned his whole chest to embers. He did not sleep well that night, and he suspected, from the way she kept finding reasons to walk the camp's edge near where he'd laid his bedroll, that she did not either. Over the following months, the road kept bringing them back together, and Clayton stopped pretending to himself it was coincidence. The uneasy truce between the human garrisons and the Ashfang clan had, in the aftermath of the bandit troubles, produced an odd arrangement. Ashfang patrols would help keep the worst of the highway bandits off the Pilgrim Road and the border stretches, in exchange for the human garrisons easing the toll fees on Ashfang traders passing through Fort Kestrel and the other way stations. It was fragile, and neither side much liked it, but it held, mostly because both sides were tired of burying their dead over grazing lines. Urzoth, as the clan's most trusted war captain, was given command of the northern patrol route, which happened to run along nearly the same stretch of Pilgrim Road that Clayton's wagon-master contracts kept sending him down. He told himself the first 3 times it was coincidence. By the 4th, when he found her patrol waiting at the ford below the broken wheel weighhouse with fresh meat already smoking over a fire, clearly expecting him, he stopped telling himself anything at all and simply let it be what it was. They fell into an easy rhythm those months. Not courtship, not yet. Not with the wariness both sides still carried about anything crossing the line between orc and human, but something that had the shape of one, built from small stolen moments along a dangerous road. She would ride escort a day or 2 of his route when their paths crossed, and they would talk while the wagons rolled, about nothing important and everything that mattered her clan's grazing troubles. His mother's people who had come west generations back and never quite belonged anywhere since. The shrine songs pilgrims sang badly and off-key. The particular loneliness of a life spent always moving and never staying anywhere long enough to be known. "You are a strange kind of human," she told him once, as they walked their horses side by side along a ridge trail while the wagons wound below. "Most of your kind who see an orc see only a weapon, or a threat, or a thing to fear. You looked at me starving in a cage and saw a person who needed bread. You looked like a person who needed bread," he said simply. Seemed the obvious thing to see. It was not obvious to Captain Dunmore. "Dunmore's an ass," Clayton said, and she laughed, a real laugh startled out of her, rich and rough and entirely unguarded, and he thought it might be the best sound he had ever heard. There was a night, some months into that fragile companionship, at the broken wheel weighhouse, when the unspoken thing between them finally broke its banks. A storm had caught his train 2 hours from the weighhouse, rain coming down in sheets that turned the road to a river of mud, and by the time they reached shelter, half his pilgrims were soaked through and shivering, and the weigh-house's common room was crowded wall to wall with travelers doing the same. Urzoth's patrol had taken shelter in the weigh-house's barn, and Clayton, once his charges were settled by the common room fire, found himself walking out into the rain again without entirely deciding to, drawn toward the lantern light glowing through the barn's open door. She was alone there, working oil into the leather of her war harness by lantern light, rain drumming on the roof above, and she looked up when he came in dripping and did not seem surprised at all to see him. "You will catch a fever, wandering in weather like this," she said. "Probably," he agreed, and did not leave. She set the oil rag aside. In the lantern light, her eyes were dark gold, and the rain sound filled the silence between them until it felt like something alive, something pressing them closer without either of them moving. "Clayton Holloway," she said, his full name the way she always said it, like she was weighing it and finding it worth the wait. "You should know that I have decided something." "What's that?" "That I have stopped calling this a debt," she said, "and started calling it a want. I did not intend to. It is inconvenient. My clan does not look kindly on captains who want things they should not want, but I find I do not much care what is convenient when it comes to you." He crossed the barn without answering, because there was nothing to say that would match what she had just said, and when he reached her she did not pull back, did not make it easy or hard, just watched him come with those steady amber eyes until he was close enough to feel the heat of her, close enough to see the fine scar through one eyebrow he had never asked about, close enough that when he lifted his hand to her jaw carefully, giving her every chance to stop him, she leaned into it instead of away. "I have wanted this since the cage," she admitted, low, rough. "Since you knelt in the dirt in front of soldiers who would have gladly seen you flogged for it, and you did not care. I have wanted this a long time, Clayton Holloway." "I have too," he said, "longer than I'd admit to anyone but you." She kissed him first, which he would tell himself later made a kind of sense, given everything about her that led, but it did not feel like leading. In the moment, it felt like falling, her mouth warm and certain against his, one clawed hand fisting careful and gentle in the front of his rain-soaked coat, and he kissed her back with every bit of the want he'd been folding down small for months. And the storm outside roared on, and neither of them noticed it at all. They did not speak of it again in the morning, not directly, not with words, but something had shifted and stayed shifted, and from then on there was no pretending, at least between the two of them, that this was only gratitude on either side. It was 2 months later, at a shrine so small and remote most pilgrims never bothered stopping there. A crumbling stone circle dedicated to some forgotten road, god, tucked in a hollow off the main pilgrim path where Ashfang patrol routes and Clayton's wagon road happened to cross, that the deeper claiming happened. She had told him about it beforehand, carefully, watching his face for any flinch of fear or disgust, because she said orc customs of the heart were not gentle things, and she would not have him bound to her without knowing exactly what it meant. Among the Ashfang, she explained, when a warrior chose a mate, she marked them, a bite at the meeting of neck and shoulder, deep enough to scar, given freely and received freely, a claiming that told any orc who saw it that this person belonged to her and she to them, past clan lines, past law, past everything but the choosing itself. It was not done lightly. It was rarely done with humans at all, and never without cost if discovered by those who disapproved. "If my clan sees it," she warned him, "some will call it shame. Grash Ironjaw, most of all, he has wanted my place as war captain for years and would use anything against me. If your people see it, they may call you tainted or worse. I will not blame you if you say no." "I'm not going to say no," Clayton said, and meant it entirely. "I've never in my life been wanted the way you want me, Urzoth. I'm not giving that up for anyone's comfort but yours and mine." So on a warm night beneath that crumbling shrine's broken stones, with only the two of them and a small fire and the wide, unbothered sky above, she marked him, her teeth careful even in that intimacy, the pain sharp and brief, and then gone into something that felt instead like being anchored, like being chosen so thoroughly there was no room left in him for the old loneliness he'd carried his whole working life. And after, trembling slightly with an emotion she did not bother hiding, she pressed his hand to her own throat where the collar scar still lived pale against her skin, and told him that was where she wanted his mark too, someday, when he was ready to give it, not tonight, not as a mere obligation, but whenever it was true for him and not before. That night, wrapped together beneath the shrine's broken stones with the fire burned low, he learned exactly how much warmth a woman built for war could hold when she let herself be gentle, and she learned that a man built for patience and steady hands could want just as fiercely as any warrior, and neither of them had ever felt less alone in their lives. The mark should have stayed hidden. It did not. 3 weeks later, Clayton's wagon train stopped at Fort Kestrel to resupply before the last leg to Thistlewood, and it was there, in the fort's crowded yard beside the well, that his collar shifted as he hauled a water barrel and Captain Dunmore, the same Dunmore from the cage, still garrisoned there. Still nursing whatever grudge a small, cruel man nurses against those who once shamed him in front of his soldiers, happened to be standing close enough to see the raised scar at his throat for exactly what it was. "What in the burning hells is that?" Dunmore said, loud enough that half the yard turned to look, and Clayton's hand went to his collar too late, and he saw the exact moment recognition curdled into disgust on the captain's face. "That's an orc claiming mark. I've seen them on dead raiders. Someone want to tell me why a human wagon master's walking around wearing one?" The yard went very quiet. Pilgrims and traders and off-duty soldiers all turned to stare, and Clayton felt the old familiar instinct to make himself small, to explain it away, and crushed it, because there was nothing about Urzoth he was willing to make small for anyone's comfort. "Because I chose her," he said, "same as she chose me." "You let an orc bite you," Dunmore said, as if the words themselves were an accusation of madness. "You know what that means. That's a claiming. That's a war captain of the Ashfang clan marking you like livestock, like a mate," Clayton corrected, steady despite the way his heart was slamming. "Not livestock, a mate. Her word, not mine, and I'm proud of it." It might have ended there. Ugly words and uglier looks, but nothing worse. Except that word of it outran Clayton down the road faster than his own wagons could travel, carried by traders and soldiers eager for gossip. And it reached the Ashfang camp within the same week, specifically, Grash Ironjaw, the rival war captain who had wanted Urzoth's command for years, and found in this scandal exactly the weapon he had been waiting for. Clayton did not learn how bad it had become until he reached the broken wheel weighhouse on his return leg and found Urzoth's second, a younger warrior named Yaskal, waiting for him at the crossroads, grim-faced and travel-worn. "You must come," Yaskal said without preamble. "Grash has called a challenge before the whole camp. He says Urzoth Strongtusk has shamed the clan by marking a human, that she is unfit to hold her captaincy, that the claim must be broken or she must answer for it with her rank and her honor both. The matriarch has allowed the challenge to stand. It happens at dusk, at the Shrine of Three Roads, where the humans will also be gathering. Captain Dunmore has ridden ahead to demand the garrison strip you of your wagon-master's contract for consorting with the enemy, and there is talk worse than that among some of the settlers, talk of putting you out of every town on this road for good." Clayton did not hesitate. He left his current train in the care of his most trusted teamster and rode through the night toward the Shrine of Three Roads, and every mile of that ride he thought of a starving woman in a cage who had trusted him enough to eat from his hand in front of soldiers who wanted her dead, and how there was no possible version of himself that would let her stand alone now. The Shrine of Three Roads sat at the meeting point of the pilgrim path and two lesser trails. A wide clearing ringed with old standing stones and shrine lanterns kept burning by whichever traveler passed through last. And by the time Clayton arrived at dusk, the clearing was crowded on both sides, Ashfang warriors in their war leathers on one side, human garrison soldiers and settlers and traders from 3 different way stations on the other, drawn by rumor and dread in equal measure. The fragile truce between them stretched thin enough that a single wrong word might snap it entirely. Urzoth stood in the center of the clearing, her war harness laced tight, her axe in hand, facing Grash Ironjaw across a space that had clearly been marked for a duel. She looked magnificent and furious, and when her eyes found Clayton pushing through the crowd on the human side, briefly and unmistakably relieved, though she covered it fast with the flat warrior's mask she wore for her own people. "You should not have come," she said low, as he broke free of the crowd and strode toward the clearing's edge. "This is clan business, Clayton." "It's my business too," he said. "You marked me because you chose me. I'm not going to stand on the sidelines while someone tries to make you pay for that alone." Grash Ironjaw laughed, ugly and satisfied, his own axe resting easy against his shoulder. "The human speaks. How touching. Matriarch, do you see now what this claiming has made of our war captain, a woman who lets her human pet march into clan matters uninvited?" The matriarch, an older orc woman with gray-streaked hair and a face seamed with old scars, sat on a flat stone at the clearing's edge with the weight of judgment in her expression, and beside her, on the human side, stood Dunmore and a magistrate from the nearest garrison town, equally grim. "Speak your challenge plainly, Grash Ironjaw," the matriarch said, "so all here understand what is being decided." "I challenge Urzoth Strongtusk's fitness to hold her captaincy," Grash said, loud enough for the whole clearing to hear. "She has marked a human as her mate, a shame our clan has not carried in 3 generations, and a weakness her enemies will use against us at every parley from here to the mountains. I say the claim be broken, the human sent from this road forever, and the captaincy passed to one who has not compromised her honor for a weak human's touch." A murmur ran through the Ashfang side, some clearly agreeing, others watching Urzoth with something more like curiosity than condemnation. On the human side, Dunmore stepped forward before Urzoth could answer. "And on our side," Dunmore said, "the garrison magistrate has ruled that Clayton Holloway's wagon-master contract be revoked for consorting with hostile Orc clan leadership, and that he be barred from every way station on this road under garrison authority. Some would call for worse, given what he's done, marked like an animal by that creature." "Careful," Clayton said, and something in his voice, quiet but with an edge none of them had heard from him before, made even Dunmore pause. "You can take my contract. You can bar me from every way station between here and the sea if that's what makes you feel safer in your own skin, but you will not call her a creature in front of me again." "Clayton," Urzoth said, warning, but he was already walking forward, past the edge where the human crowd stood, into the open ground of the clearing itself, until he stood beside her, facing both crowds at once. "You all want to know why I wear her mark," he said, loud enough to carry across the whole clearing, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll tell you exactly why, and you can decide for yourselves what kind of shame that is. A year and a half ago at Fort Kestrel, I saw a starving prisoner in a cage, a war captain of the Ashfang clan held as leverage, denied even scraps by men who wanted to break her spirit before a parley. I had 1 ration on me. Hard bread, dried meat, nothing much. I gave it to her because she was starving and I wasn't, and because I couldn't sit there eating in front of a person going hungry and call myself decent afterward. That's the whole of it. That's the crime you're all so furious about." He looked at Urzoth, and found her watching him with an expression he had never quite seen on her before, something raw, something unguarded even in front of both her clan and his people. "She didn't forget that," Clayton went on. "She could have. Most people would have. Instead, she carried that debt for a year, repaid it in blood on a bandit-choked road when she didn't have to lift a finger for me, kept coming back when neither of our people wanted us anywhere near each other, And somewhere along the way that debt turned into something neither of us planned on and both of us wanted anyway. She marked me because she chose me, not because I forced anything, not because I tricked anything out of her. Because for the first time in my whole life, someone looked at me and decided I was worth choosing, fully and completely, and I'm not going to stand here and let either of you shame her for that. The clearing had gone very quiet. Even Grash Ironjaw, mid-sneer, seemed uncertain how to answer a man who had walked willingly into the center of a blood-feud clearing and refused to flinch. The matriarch rose from her stone seat, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of long authority. "A debt of honor repaid and repaid again," she said slowly, "is not a small thing among our people, Grash Ironjaw, whatever shame you wish to hang upon it. Our oldest laws say a life owed and a life given in answer binds two people beyond clan, beyond blood, beyond even the choosing of captains. You call this weakness. I call it the very honor our clan claims to prize above all things, wearing a face you do not like." "Matriarch," Grash started, but she raised a hand and he fell silent, old habits of respect outweighing his fury. "The challenge," the matriarch said, "was raised on the claim that this bond shames the clan. I have heard the wagon-master's account, and I do not hear shame in it. I hear a debt kept faithfully on both sides, human and orc, which is rarer and more honorable than most bonds struck between our own kind. Urzoth Strongtusk, do you renounce the mark, or do you stand by it?" "I stand by it," Urzoth said, without a single second of hesitation, loud enough for every soul in that clearing to hear. "I have stood by it since the night I gave it, and I will stand by it until I am ash, whatever any of you think of it." "Then the challenge fails," the matriarch declared. "Grash Ironjaw, you called this contest on grounds that do not hold. If you wish to challenge her captaincy on some other ground, you may raise it properly at the next council fire. Until then, this clearing is not yours to shed blood in." Grash's face went dark with fury, but even he understood the weight of the matriarch's ruling in front of the whole assembled clan, and after a long, hate-filled moment, he lowered his axe and stepped back, though the look he threw at Clayton promised this was not entirely finished. On the human side, the magistrate was already muttering to Dunmore about the impropriety of overturning a garrison ruling on the say of an orc matriarch. But before either man could speak, a new voice cut across the clearing. An old settler woman Clayton recognized from the Broken Wheel Wayhouse, one of the pilgrims his train had carried through the storm the very night his bond with Urzoth had first broken open. "I'll speak if the magistrate will hear a settler's word," she called out, pushing forward with the particular fearlessness of the very old. "I was on Holloway's train the night bandits nearly killed the lot of us on the road below the Broken Wheel. It was orc warriors under that woman's command who came down off the ridge and saved every soul in our party, my grandson included, and asked nothing for it but a fire to share. I don't much care what she is or what mark she wears on her man's throat. I care that my grandson is alive because of her, and I'll not stand here and watch you punish the man who brought that kindness into being in the first place, just because it frightens you to see it." A ripple of agreement moved through parts of the human crowd, not all of them, not even most, but enough that Dunmore's face reddened with the particular frustration of a man who had expected an easy villain and found instead a crowd unwilling to hand him one. "This is not a matter for mob sentiment," the magistrate said stiffly, though his conviction had visibly weakened. "No," Clayton agreed. "It's a matter for the truth. And the truth is she saved lives on this road that your garrison couldn't or wouldn't. And I'd rather wear her mark and lose every contract in this territory than pretend otherwise to keep my comfort." Dunmore looked between the matriarch's unmoved authority, the murmuring crowd, and the magistrate's uncertain face, and seemed to understand with visible bitterness that he had lost whatever ground he thought he'd claimed. "Fine," he said at last. "Fine. The contract stands revoked on garrison land, that much I won't undo on my own authority, but I'll not press it further, and I'll not stand here arguing with a crowd that's already decided which fool to root for." It was not a full victory, not in the way Dunmore's small cruelty would have wanted to punish, and it left Clayton without his old garrison contracts along that stretch of the road, a real cost, one that would take time and new arrangements to work around. But it was, in every way that mattered, an ending to the danger that had gathered around them both, and Clayton found he did not mind the cost half so much as he might have expected, standing there in the fading light with Urzoth's hand finding his. "You are going to be trouble to keep, Clayton Holloway," she murmured, low enough that it was only for him, though the whole clearing was still watching. "Losing contracts for me. Standing in the middle of clan business like you belong there." "I do belong there," he said. "Wherever you are, that's where I belong now. Debt's about as settled as it's ever going to get, don't you think?" "The debt was settled a long time ago," she said, something fierce and warm moving across her face. "This is not debt anymore, Clayton. This has not been debt for a long time." "I know," he said. "Just wanted to hear you say it." She laughed then, that same rich, unguarded laugh he had first heard on a ridge trail a lifetime of small moments ago. And in front of the matriarch and the muttering magistrate and Grash Ironjaws, still simmering fury, and the old settler woman's approving nod, and every soul from both sides of a road that had tried so hard to keep them from each other. Urzoth Strongtusk pulled Clayton Holloway in by the front of his coat and kissed him unhurried, unhidden, entirely unashamed. Right there in the center of the Shrine of Three Roads, with the standing stones bearing silent witness, and the shrine lanterns burning steady in the dusk. No one in that clearing looked away, and for the first time since the whole ugly business had started, no one seemed to want to. The following spring, when the Pilgrim Road opened again after the winter snows, Clayton Holloway did not return to garrison contracts at all. He found new work instead, escorting trade caravans and settler trains along a route jointly guaranteed by both the Ashfang clan and a coalition of border towns that had, in the wake of the Shrine of Three Roads gathering, finally struck a fuller and steadier peace than the old fragile truce had ever managed. A peace that people along the road began to half-jokingly credit to the wagon-master and his war captain, as if their bond had somehow proven a point neither side could argue past. Urzoth kept her captaincy. Grash Ironjaw's grumbling reduced over time to background noise, no one much listened to anymore, and the two of them made their home in a wide stone and timber wayhouse of their own building near the Broken Wheel Crossing, where pilgrims and traders alike came to know that a starving orc prisoner and a wagon-master's ration of bread had, against every expectation either world once held, become the truest love story the Pilgrim Road had to tell. They kept a small shrine of their own outside that wayhouse door, nothing grand, just a flat stone and a lantern that never went out, and travelers passing through sometimes asked what God it honored. Urzoth always answered the same way, her hand finding Clayton's without needing to look for it, her amber eyes warm in a way they had learned, slowly and against every hard lesson the world had tried to teach her, to let show freely. "No God," she would say. "A debt, the best one I ever collected." And Clayton, standing beside her with the mark of her choosing still pale and permanent at his throat, would only smile, because he had long since stopped being the overlooked, ordinary man who once knelt in Fort Dust with nothing to offer but his own supper and become, instead, exactly what she had decided, on a hungry night in an iron cage, that he already was. Someone worth remembering, worth choosing, worth keeping, for as long as either of them drew breath on that long and rugged road. They did not marry in the way either people's law required, since neither garrison magistrate nor clan council had quite caught up to blessing what the two of them already knew to be true between themselves. But among the pilgrims and traders who came to know them, no one who watched Urzoth Strongtusk stand at Clayton Holloway's side ever doubted for a moment that they were bound tighter than any ceremony could make official. She still rode the northern patrols when raiders or bandits threatened the road, and he still drove his wagons through rain and dust and the long grinding miles between shrine towns, but they went out from the same door each morning and came back to it each evening, And in between, on the roads and at the way-houses and beneath the standing stones of shrines old and new, the debt that had started with a single ration of hard bread kept paying itself forward, again and again, in the shape of two people who had found, against every hard edge of their separate worlds, exactly where they belonged. Some years later, when a young pilgrim girl passing through asked Urzoth, wide-eyed, whether it was true she had once been a prisoner starving in a cage, Urzoth only laughed low and warm, and glanced toward the wayhouse door where Clayton stood mending a wagon wheel in the afternoon light, sleeves rolled to his elbows, exactly as steady and unremarkable and entirely beloved as the day she had first decided to remember his name. Once, Urzoth said, a long time ago in another life, a man who had nothing to spare gave me the only thing he had and asked for nothing back. I have spent every day since deciding how best to repay him, and I have come to understand something about debts like that, little pilgrim. She smiled, tusks and all, and it was the softest expression the girl had ever seen on a warrior's face. Some debts are not meant to be settled. They are meant to be lived in, for as long as you are lucky enough to have the one who is owed still standing beside you. The girl did not fully understand, not then, but she remembered the words years later, when she was grown and had debts and loves of her own to carry. And she thought of the wagon-master and the war captain on the pilgrim road, and how the truest kind of love, she had come to learn, so often began exactly that, simply with someone hungry and someone willing to share the only thing they had.